be in a band and be part of that life, so I get to hear all the good stories from the road and everything like that. So, but that's me in a nutshell. And I am here to talk to you tonight about the field of religious education. Now, I'm going to make as we go through it, I want to make a list of words well, you're going to help me make up a list of words that we encounter when we start talking about religious education. When you think of teaching and learning, what are some of the basic requirements? Now, this is not a trick question.
Curriculum?
All right, there has to be a content. See, I put down here, that's number 3. But that's okay. You got to have a teacher, thank you. And you have to have a learner. Now, can sometimes these two things be the same? Sure. Sometimes you can be self-taught. You could teach yourself things of some particular content. But now these are 3 good basic ones. We're going to get 6 or 7 up here before we're done, but how do these 3 basic parts interact? That's what we want to talk about for a moment. I've come up with 6, yes. Sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 7. It's 6 this time. 6 different encounters between teacher, learner, and content that I want us to look at. The first, we have teacher, learner, content, is what I call the transmissive. Let me write these over here. This is a transmissive encounter. The content, if it's given life at all, is through the teacher. The teacher goes, learns the content, absorbs the content, and then takes it to the learner. So if the learner doesn't get anything, it's the teacher's fault, because the teacher's absorbed all the information that the teacher can, and the teacher tries to transmit it, if you will, to the learner. Kind of carries the content, carries the learning to the learner, all right? We'll make that number 1. We'll make this number 2. Teacher, learner, content. Okay? This one is content focused. Content focused. That is where the teacher and the learner meet around the content itself. So in a way, the content becomes the teacher. It becomes the reason people are together. You think of it like a forum where people come together from all over to talk about a particular topic, a lectureship series, a debate, a symposium, where it's not necessarily the people that are involved that are so important, even though sometimes they are. It's the content that brings everybody together. Okay? All right, we're doing okay? Good. Number 3. I call this, I don't know why, just self. And maybe you'll see what I'm talking about here. We have the teacher, the learner, and the content. And the interaction really is between just the teacher and the learner without regard to the content. Now, that can be like an encounter group where people get together to learn about themselves and through their interaction with each other. It can kind of be like gathering around the water fountain at work. And you're there for the quote, the water or the coffee, but what you're really there for is to talk to the other person. That just becomes the excuse or the reason for going there. And really, it's the interaction between the two of you. Now these are all pretty simple things when you look at them. So what makes religious education a little different? We're going to begin kind of moving in that direction here. The first one I call personal encounter. All right, can I erase number 1? Is that okay? Maybe I can, maybe I can't. I guess all I really had to erase is the lines. This is where the teacher has developed a personal love and a personal caring for the content. We all had those teachers that were our favorite teachers that really kind of embodied what they were teaching, that kind of, whether it be an English teacher or a religion teacher or whatever, that kind of just, they lived this stuff. That was what they lived and breathed. And because they also cared about the learner. They cared about the learner. So the teacher would bring the learner to the content, trying to have a personal encounter between the content. The teacher loves the content. The teacher loves the patient. So it becomes something that is personal to the teacher. It becomes something that is personal to the learner. And that's where we begin moving into the realm of knowing as loving. Where knowing and loving begin to touch each other. Let's see. Oh, this is my favorite one. Well, maybe, I don't know. Dialogue. This is where the teacher interacts with the learner enters into dialogue with the teacher. The teacher encounters the content and becomes in dialogue with the content. The learner then is engaged in the content, and the content is in dialogue with the learner. There's a book that's out of print. It's called The Miracle of Dialogue. The Miracle of Dialogue by Rule Howe, H-O-W-E. If you ever see it, you ought to snatch it right up. Because he talks about how teaching really is the language of relationships. He said, especially when we get into Christian teaching, we begin speaking a different kind of language, a language of loving. Because now, the content becomes something that is not just history, not just art. The content now becomes the good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is now the content that we begin talking about in this encounter. And just think how powerful that is. How powerful that word, that good news is. The Bible says it's sharper than a two-edged sword, and we get our word dynamite from how we talk about giving out the word and the power of God and everything like that. We got this powerful word, this life-changing information, and then every Sunday we throw water all over it and make it as boring as heck. And that's what we do. For the most part, we have this dynamic content that we can't even get people to teach, that we can't get people to come and hear, because maybe we're not entering into a real type of dialogue with people. I know this. One of my jobs as Govins was working with religious education, and I'll be honest with you, there's times I was just thankful to fill a position with a semi-breathing body, that's not the way you should do it. You should find people who feel called to it, people who look forward to it, who really have the gift of teaching for it. Last one. Actually, this is number 5 now, isn't it? No, that's 5. This one will be 6. Yes. This is number 6, and I have to erase this. I'll draw it, and then we'll name it. There's a dialogue that's going on similar to this, but we're going to add another factor. We're going to add what we're going to call G up here for God. Yes, ding, 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 ding. Thank you. Yes, God. This is simple. There are no trick questions here. It's pretty straightforward. And because we could put S or whatever for the spirit, or that's why I call this the transcendent dimension. obviously God is in contact with the contact with God, teacher with learner, learner with teacher, teacher with God, God with teacher, God with learner, learner with God, teacher with content, content with teacher, learner with content, content with teacher, with learner. Whew. That's just with two people. The content helps us all enter into dialogue with the supernatural, with that which is beyond us. When I was in seminary, the older son was about 5, and to this day we don't know where this came from, but he had this saying that drove us crazy, as most 4 or 5-year-olds would do. He would get in your face and say, "Wrong-o, moose face." And we would laugh, ha, 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 well, that's funny, that's funny. Well, I also was teaching an adult religious education class at the church where I was attending. And basically, I was practicing my dissertation on the group. They knew it. I did it on imagination and imagery and guided imagery. So we would do that fairly often in Sunday school. One particular Sunday, this lady was very moved. I could see that she was in tears, and she was just really, really touched. And she came up to me after the class was over, and she said, "You've helped me figure out something that's been bothering me for years and years." Well, I went home feeling pretty good about myself. Look what I did, you know. And since we were in the South, it was Sunday afternoon, I was sitting there in a chair watching football, because that's a law in the South. It hit me. Wrong-o, moose face. That wasn't you that did that. That was the Spirit that did this. I could no more recreate that if I got up and said the exact same words to the exact same group, because this is the dynamic part of this. It's the Spirit that moves. It's the Spirit that helps it go a particular direction. I mean, look at this. What do we call all of this? I need another marker here. In teaching and learning, we need to add another word. We talk about the learning environment. We create a learning environment that opens up and invites the Spirit to come in. I do my part. You know, I do what I can do, but I'm not in control. Look at this. This is 14 different dynamics that are going on between one person and a teacher. Just think how many we have here going. It'll be 14 times however many people we have here. That's all the dynamics that are going on. I can't control that. I don't even want to try to control that. You know, sometimes we try to push it and move it over to a box and make all this fit into here, because the teacher's guide says there are goals for the lesson. You know what I'm talking about? You open it up, and if you get the teacher's book with all the answer in it when you're teaching, it has, after this lesson, the student should be able to, here are the goals for it. Now, how did that person writing that material all those years before I got it know that this was going to happen and I had to put it into this box? God bless her, my mother taught women's Bible study for like 400 years. And for better or worse, by golly, they were going to get through the lesson. You know, the lesson. In other words, what the teacher's book said we had to go through. So basically, you sat there and you were quiet until we were done. You know, because the book said it and I have to do it. I mean, you know, she was a minister's wife for, 55 years. So, it's kind of get that content in there. But I can no more make this go into there. I can try to push it and get it in that direction. But I have to be open to the way the Spirit leads. Now, does that mean I go in every Sunday when I go ready to teach, say, "Oh, well, okay, God, give me something to teach"? Doesn't work that way. You still work and study your behind off and prepare yourself the best you can in hopes that something like this would happen. Now, just for telling you that good story, I probably could tell you 20 stories where nothing happened. And I'll bet that was more me than it was this. Too often I would get in the way a lot of times. One of the things, we need one more word, then we'll move on. In religious education programs, we don't do this very well, evaluate. Why? Why don't we evaluate in religious education? My teacher, my wife, the teacher, gets evaluated all the time, for better or worse. What do you think?
There's two reasons. One, the teacher's not confident with the material they're teaching, so they can't evaluate it if they don't know it themselves. Or there's this idea that religious education is supposed to be something that's not stress invoking, which comes with evaluation, because evaluation follows that.
Now you got it. We're afraid we'll hurt people's feelings, and they may not teach next year. If we're in charge of running an educational program or anything like that, too often, we don't want to stop and step back. But the best thing we can do is to debrief after every project, after every season. And if it's no more than just you that's in charge stepping back with the teacher and saying, okay, let's see what was good about this time. What was good about this quarter or this year? What can we do better? How can I help you do this better? That's evaluation. You know, it's not like fill out this form in triplicate and I'm going to come in and videotape you and we'll go over your teaching styles. Nah, that's not what we're talking about. So, we have 6 words and 6 events or 6 encounters. One of my favorite authors is Parker Palmer. I don't know if you've had a chance to read or encounter Parker Palmer. But his book that, I don't do it anymore, but I used to read it about every year. It's a little bitty tiny book. It's called To Know as We Are Known. To Know as We Are Known. A Spirituality of Education is what it's called. This is how he defined teaching. To teach is to create space where obedience to truth is observed. I'll say that again because it's so good. To teach is to create space where obedience to truth is observed. Yep. To teach is to create space where obedience to truth is observed. Now that's not, when you think of a definition for teaching, that's not very teachy-like, or is it? It really is. How do we create space when we teach? Well, as I mentioned here, one thing, we physically create the space. We open it up. We sit in circles around. Another way that we can help create space is through silence. That's, you know, when I first went to the church where I was at before I was at the hospital, they would have a moment of silence after the reading of the scripture. And they had like a moment, like, amen. Well, I would go a minute sometimes in silence. And you know what? After about 10 or 15 seconds, you hear it. Because people weren't comfortable with silence. People just weren't comfortable with it. After a while, they got caught on and, you know, they realized we're going to be quiet for a minute or two here and listen to see what the Spirit might be saying to us instead of us just doing all the talking. But that's creating silence can oftentimes be thought of the most horrible thing to do in teaching. I mean, aren't we supposed to, when we teach, aren't we supposed to talk? Aren't we supposed to fill up the space with our words? Well, that may be the problem. We have too many words in the way. So right now, we're going to do an activity in creating space. What I would like for you to do is where you're sitting, take a look at the room. this room that we're in here. Ask it some questions. What stories do you think this room could tell you if it could talk? What is its history? Who has been in here? What's happened in this room? Are there any secrets from this room? How many people have been here? Just take a minute and look around. Okay, now I want you to find one particular spot in the room. Zero in on that spot. Focus on that spot and see what that spot teaches you. What you can learn from that spot. All right, Parker Palmer in his book, To Know As We Are Known, outlines 3 characteristics of a learning space. I wrote them up there on the board for you. The first characteristic of a good learning space is openness. It has to be open enough to see what's going on, to actually be in the space and be part of it. Because everything teaches us. We just saw a door teach us, a window pane, a map. And Jesus was continually saying, behold, look, see. All that from the oneness that was in the open space around him. He used everything to teach. A dying fig tree, mud, dirt, everything. So the space has to be open enough for us to encounter things. The second characteristic is boundaries. Now you have to put boundaries around so people will notice what's going on. If the space is totally unlimited, then there's chaos. I mean, in my day, I was a pretty good college and after college tennis player. And I probably would have been a lot better if it wasn't for those pesky lines, But it was those lines that did what? They made the game, right? We had to have boundaries or the game wouldn't be a game, The third is hospitality. Here he talks a lot about the biblical image of hospitality, of taking in the stranger. Being open to what is strange, what is different, what is foreign. You're told to welcome in the stranger because you never know when you might be a stranger. It's what he told the Hebrews wandering through in their nomadic travels. You take people in, you give them shelter, you protect them. Are we willing to show that kind of hospitality? Are we willing to create safe places for things that are different than what we usually think they should be? Are we willing to have that safe harbor for people and welcome them even if they're unknown to us? That's part of a good learning and teaching space, is as creating a safe place where people feel that they can trust what's going on there. At the hospital, we always say, what happens at the hospital stays at the hospital. Like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, But that's kind of a secular twist upon what we're talking about here, of really being able to trust each other so you can share who you really are in a teaching and learning space. Okay? Last thing, my final story. There was a man who bought a house. The house was right next door to a railroad track. Right next door to it. Bought the house, he moved in that first night, 2 o'clock at night. The man is sound asleep. All of a sudden, woo-woo, the man jumps up. What is that? And he's, it's the train. That goes on for about a week. Every night, 2 o'clock. What is that? Oh, that's the train. Well, 1 week passes, 2 weeks. After about 3 weeks, 2 o'clock comes. Woo, 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 man. Oh. And he just kind of just rolls over and goes back to sleep. About a month goes by. Woo, woo. Doesn't even notice it. And then, one night, there's no train. The man jumps up in bed and says, "What wasn't that?" And I tell you that because everything teaches. Everything we do in church teaches. Everything. There's not one thing you can think of that doesn't teach people something about their faith, something about, and that can be good or bad. So you have to be careful. But everything we do, however we engage people, however we set up our classrooms, however we organize our church structure, whatever materials we use, all of that teaches something. So if you don't remember anything else tonight, remember that everything we do teaches. And you need to stop and pay attention to what you're doing, because you're teaching people whether you want to or not. Thank you all very much.